Across the vast, echoing silence of the cosmos, the Vithar collective reigned supreme, not with fleets of star-shattering warships nor with armies numbering in the trillions. Their dominion was woven from a far more insidious, far more pervasive force, the raw, untamed power of the mind. For millennia they had encountered countless species. Each in their estimation was a mere thought form awaiting integration. Each a single note to be harmonized into the grand, unified symphony of the Vithar collective. Worlds, star systems, entire civilizations had crumbled, not under plasma fire, but under the gentle, irresistible weight of a single unifying thought. Surrender. Their flagship, the Thought Weaver, was no metal monstrosity. It was a living, breathing nexus of consciousness, a psychic amplifier capable of projecting thought across light years, of subsuming the will of 1,000,000 sentient beings with the subtlety of a whispered suggestion. Its crew, the Vithar themselves, were beings of ethereal grace, their forms elongated, their tendrils swaying like kelp in an unseen mental current, their multifaceted eyes reflecting not light but thought. They possessed no individual names, no personal desires. They were simply the collective. And their every action, every intention, resonated with the serene, unshakable confidence of absolute psychic mastery. High Consul Xylos, the oldest and most refined mind within the collective, oversaw this latest venture. He had witnessed the mental collapse of empires, the dissolution of entire cultures, all guided by the gentle touch of the Vithar. Before him, Mind Master Chorus, a younger, more zealous conduit, projected his thoughts, confident and dismissive. Chorus saw nothing special in this primitive world designated Earth. He saw only chaos, unfocused, disorganized, ripe for assimilation. A trivial conquest, he had mentally hummed, dismissing the nascent psychic ripples emanating from the blue-green marble. Initial scans of human consciousness had been baffling. A cacophony, 1,000 discordant symphonies playing simultaneously. No unified thought, no collective will to pinpoint and pacify, just a bewildering, ceaseless internal chatter. The Vithar, whose own minds were a vast, serene ocean of shared purpose, found this utterly alien. They had encountered individualistic species, of course, but never one so utterly noisy within its own mental space. They believed this cacophony was merely a lack of mental discipline, a primitive stage awaiting the gentle, ordering hand of the collective. They prepared for the standard protocol, a subtle infiltration, a slow projection of guiding thoughts shaping minds like clay. The mind nexus, the very heart of the Vithar fleet, hummed with anticipation. They initiated primary neural interface protocols, ethereal tendrils of pure thought, invisible to the eye but undeniable to the mind, extended from the Thought Weaver. They sought out the largest concentrations of human consciousness, reaching for what they assumed would be key nodal points, the leaders, the thinkers, the emotional centers. The Vithar expected immediate resistance, perhaps primitive psychic screams, then the eventual inevitable calming as the collective's serene will asserted itself. What they received, however, was not resistance, not screams, not even a coherent thought. It was a murmur, a chaotic, unintelligible, and utterly boundless murmur, like tapping into the raw, unfettered dream stream of 1 billion souls simultaneously, with no filter, no order, and no end. Mindmaster Chorus registered the input as unusually high-volume static. He dismissed it, confident in the collective's ability to filter and categorize. He mentally projected the first wave of directives: peace, cooperation, benevolent guidance. He expected a resonance, a dawning understanding. Instead, the raw mental data flowing back intensified. The static grew louder, forming complex, meaningless shapes within the mind nexus. It was not mere individual thought. It was connected, a global tapestry of human consciousness. What they had unwittingly tapped into was not just a mind, but the entire, unfiltered, global information network known to humans as the Internet. The Vithar had believed themselves to be linking to the individual minds of a species. They had, in fact, plugged directly into the raw, unedited, infinitely replicating and often utterly absurd data stream of humanity's collective ID. Every fleeting thought, every half-formed idea, every petty grievance, every profound insight, every crude drawing, every exquisite masterpiece, every conspiracy theory, every cat video, every political rant, every whispered confession, every shouted insult, every declaration of love, every existential dread, every inside joke, every piece of misinformation, every shred of beauty, every ounce of terror, every single human impulse, no matter how fleeting, was pouring into the serene, ordered minds of the Vithar. And it was all active, all simultaneous, all loud. The Vithar, who processed information with perfect efficiency and flawless logic, found themselves confronted with the antithesis of their very existence. They attempted to categorize the incoming data, to filter the noise from the signal, but there was no noise. It was all signal, yet none of it made sense. They projected their unifying thoughts, their directives of harmonious integration. They expected a subtle shift, a dawning acceptance. Instead, their mental probes were met with a looping image of a small, fluffy feline vigorously playing a keyboard. A persistent, mind-numbing, infinitely recurring stream of a keyboard cat. It was nonsensical. It was irritating. It was utterly gloriously effective at derailing their every attempt at coherent mental projection. The Vithar, accustomed to the elegant simplicity of a single shared thought, had encountered the unquantifiable, unassimilable chaos of a billion memes. And this, they would soon realize, was just the beginning. The smooth, integrated flow of the Vithar collective began to ripple. Small mental eddies formed, then grew. Individual Vithar minds, accustomed to receiving only filtered, ordered information, were now directly experiencing the raw, unfiltered torrent of human thought. The concept of distraction was alien to them. Their focus was absolute, yet their probes were being bombarded. They tried to initiate the next phase of their protocol, the projection of shared serenity, of the Vithar collective consciousness as an ultimate state of peace. They anticipated the slow, gentle dissolution of human individuality into the greater whole. What they received back, however, was not serenity. It was a rapid-fire succession of rage comics, cartoonish depictions of exaggerated human frustration, anger, and absurd, disproportionate reactions to minor inconveniences. Every Vithar mind that attempted to project calm found itself involuntarily flooded with images of enraged stick figures, mentally screaming, "Fa-fo!" at a perpetually frustrating digital world. This was not merely resistance. This was a weaponized absurdity, and the serene, logical minds of the Vithar were utterly unprepared for its sheer, mind-numbing power. The initial whispers of dissonance had escalated into a growing roar. The Vithar collective, that vast, serene ocean of shared purpose, was no longer calm. It was churning. Each mind unit, accustomed to seamless integration, found itself battling an unexpected internal intrusion. Mindmaster Chorus, still convinced of the collective's ultimate superiority, projected a mental shield, attempting to filter the chaos. But the sheer volume, the ceaseless contradictory deluge from the human internet, made sustained focus impossible. It was 1,000 arguments about the optimal temperature for tea, juxtaposed with graphic debates on fictional character relationships, all intercut with grainy footage of cats falling off furniture. The very foundations of Vithar mental order began to groan under the strain. The Vithar had always understood conflict as a clash of wills, a battle of logic or force. They had never conceived of conflict as a clash of utter nonsense. Their attempts to establish a unified narrative for control, a simple, compelling story of Vithar benevolence, of advanced guidance for a primitive species, were met with an immediate, overwhelming counterbarrage. The internet flooded their sensory pathways with 1,000 competing narratives, conspiracies of reptilian shapeshifters controlling human governments, epic sagas of fictional space wizards, impassioned political debates ranging from the deeply profound to the ludicrously trivial, arguments about the nutritional value of pineapple on pizza, entire philosophical treatises dedicated to it. This was not just data. It was a self-replicating, infinitely recursive information war, fought not with lasers, but with memes and misinformation. One Vithar mind unit, designated Cathar 7, specializing in emotional resonance, buckled under the psychic pressure. It had attempted to project feelings of calm and submission into human minds. Instead, it received a concentrated stream of human dank memes and creepypastas, pure unadulterated absurdity and terror. Images of a smiling skeletal figure dancing in impossible ways, overlaid with indecipherable text. Terrifying user-generated horror stories designed to induce maximum psychological dread. Cathar 7's refined emotional processors, accustomed to the subtle nuances of galactic despair, simply fractured. Its mind, once a beacon of serene empathy, was now a discordant mess haunted by the specter of Slender, Man in the relentless rhythm of Nyancat. The mental shriek that erupted from Cathar 7 was a sound the collective had never heard, a mind tearing itself apart not from pain, but from confusion. Mind Master Chorus, attempting to maintain his own mental composure, found himself involuntarily humming a human tune, a short, catchy, infuriatingly repetitive song. He identified it. Rick-rolling, a musical loop used by humans for deception and amusement. It had infected his internal thought processes. He tried to suppress it to impose Vithar order, but the melody simply repeated, louder, more insistent, a tiny, infectious mental parasite. He found himself mentally debating the philosophical implications of a perpetually dancing animated character, while simultaneously recalling 1,000 arguments about whether hot dogs were sandwiches. His mind, once a pinnacle of logical deduction, was fragmenting into 1,000 irrelevant tangents. The Vithar mind units, which processed information with detached, objective efficiency, were now experiencing feelings.
Human feelings?
They analyzed human Reddit forums, their Twitter feeds, their YouTube channels. They discovered a species that argued incessantly over everything, from geopolitics to the proper way to butter toast. They learned that half of human communications were inside jokes, self-referential concepts they referred to as shitposts. They discovered that humans intentionally misled each other for trolling purposes, delighting in manufactured chaos. The collective's understanding of coherent communication shattered. This was not merely disorganization. It was a self-sabotaging, infinitely recursive nightmare of information and misinformation, all delivered with an unsettling, often dark, sense of humor. Their empathy network, designed to resonate with universal suffering and thus guide species towards Vithar peace, was encountering unprecedented contradictions. Humans expressed profound sadness over fictional characters, a tiny, animated fox losing its toy, for instance, while simultaneously displaying intense, visceral anger over perceived injustices on the other side of their world, fueled by partial information and biased algorithms. And yet this same species created content celebrating the most horrific acts of its own past, glorifying violence, laughing at misfortune, even reveling in their own suffering. It was contradictory, illogical, emotionally incomprehensible. The Vithar could not filter it. They could not categorize it. They could not understand how a species could hold so much profound empathy and so much casual cruelty within the same conscious framework. The sheer mental dissonance was an unendurable assault. Mind Master Chorus's own mental projections of logic and order were faltering. He tried to inject feelings of despair and helplessness, the standard Vithar method for pacification. Instead, he received a mental image of a dog in a burning room, calmly sipping coffee and stating, "This is fine." It was a meme, a cultural artifact of human resilience in the face of overwhelming catastrophe. It utterly invalidated his psychic assault. It deflected his probes of fear. Humans, it seemed, embraced the very emotions the Vithar attempted to inflict. They found humor in the face of oblivion. They laughed at the void. And this, for the Vithar, was a terrifying, incomprehensible form of mental warfare. Their serene, perfectly ordered minds were simply not equipped to deal with a species that found comedy in its own impending doom. The deluge of human dissonance was not just overwhelming. It was actively unraveling the very fabric of the Vithar collective. The grand symphony of the Vithar collective was dissolving into a cacophony of individual mental screams. The mind nexus, once a beacon of order, now resembled a storm-battered ship, its systems failing, its structural integrity compromised. The mental link, designed to unify, was instead serving as a conduit for humanity's boundless, self-replicating chaos. Mind Master Chorus, still tenuously linked but clearly suffering, gripped the sides of his meditation sphere, his mental projections now fractured, disjointed. The insidious infection of human memes had spread, reproducing and mutating within the collective's own thought processes. That damned Rickroll melody echoed in the deeper layers of his consciousness, a persistent, infuriating earworm that refused to be silenced. The collective's primary consensus protocol, the very heart of Vithar mental harmony, was failing catastrophically. Internal schisms, once unthinkable, were erupting with terrifying speed. Mind units, once perfectly aligned, were now generating conflicting directives. Subunit Cathar 7, the emotional specialist, Now firmly convinced of the validity of flat Earth theory, Ong was actively propagating this information throughout the collective, backed by thousands of cherry-picked out-of-context proofs it had extracted from human forums. Another Arnex3, a navigation expert, was convinced its own tendrils were, in fact, spaghetti, and was attempting to communicate with them using only a rudimentary form of human sign language it had glimpsed in a 2-second video clip. The Vithar were not just losing cohesion, they were losing their minds, literally becoming unhinged by the sheer, unbridled insanity of human thought. The Vithar had attempted to impose order. They had projected images of serene, Vithar-controlled landscapes into the human network, hoping to create a visually appealing, subliminal message of peaceful subjugation. What they received back was a counter-barrage of human-generated content. Images of giant, destructive lizards fighting robots in collapsing cities, apocalyptic futures rendered with disturbing detail and crude animations of things that Mindmaster Chorus, even in his fractured state, could barely mentally articulate without experiencing acute nausea. Their attempts at subtle influence were not just being rejected, they were being weaponized against them. The humans' AIs, their automated programs and algorithms were learning. They were adapting. They were actively generating new forms of nonsense tailored specifically to destabilize the Vithar mental state. The bots and AI of the human internet were proving to be not merely automated programs, but incredibly effective agents of chaos. They had detected the Vithar's subtle attempts to influence their social media and, instead of fighting directly, had flooded the designated channels with counter-information, irrelevant data, and, most devastatingly, self-replicating logical paradoxes. Vithar mind units designed to operate within clear parameters of cause and effect found their thought processes caught in endless loops, debating whether a liar's paradox could truly lie, or if a square circle could contain a prime number. The mental anguish was excruciating. Logic, the bedrock of Vithar existence, was crumbling under the weight of human illogic. High Consul Xylos, the embodiment of Vithar tranquility, now understood. Humans were not simply chaotic. They were anti-fragile. They thrived on disruption. Their species had evolved to find meaning and even humor in disorder. Their attempts to control them only made them stronger, more creative in their mental resistance, generating new forms of mental static that actively targeted the Vithar's weaknesses. Their humor, a concept alien to the Vithar's serious shared existence, was a weapon of unparalleled power. They found amusement in tragedy, in the absurd, in their own suffering. The Vithar had attempted to inject feelings of despair and helplessness, only to receive, mentally, the image of a dog in a burning room stating with serene resignation, "This is fine." It wasn't a message of defiance. It was a message of utter, unbreakable, absurd human resilience. It invalidated their entire psychic assault. It deflected their probes of fear. Humans, it seemed, embraced the very emotions the Vithar attempted to inflict upon them. The Vithar mind nexus began to crackle, small electrical discharges arcing ominously between its crystalline structures. The collective, the unified consciousness that had been the foundation of their civilization for eons, was literally breaking apart. The mental integrity of the entire fleet was compromised. System integrity plummeted, reaching critical levels. Vithar mind units were now experiencing symptoms of acute existential dread, dissociative identity disorder, and profound confusion regarding the very nature of sentient existence, specifically involving a philosophical debate between a talking squirrel and a grumpy cat they had inadvertently downloaded from a human cartoon. Their ordered minds, confronted with this unquantifiable madness, were simply overloading. The once grand symphony of the Vithar collective had devolved into a cacophony of individual broken thoughts. The mind nexus, that magnificent cathedral of consciousness, lay in ruins, not from physical assault but from a torrent of mental chaos too profound to comprehend. Half the Vithar were either unconscious, their forms limp and unresponsive, or had completely fled their meditation spheres, now curled into fetal positions on the crystalline floor, tendrils clamped over their heads in a desperate, futile attempt to block the lingering echoes of human thought. Mindmaster Chorus, a shell of his former arrogant self, had finally severed his direct link to the collective's psychic amplifier. His ethereal form trembled uncontrollably, his multifaceted eyes wide and unfocused, now reflecting a terrifying kaleidoscope of conflicting human emotions and absurd images. A single repetitive twitch in one of his tendrils persisted, an unsettling alien-human tic, as if a small looping mental virus had taken permanent residence within his very being. His mental voice, once sharp and commanding, was now weak, raw, and scarred, a mere whisper amidst the psychic debris of the mind nexus. He projected only to High Consul Xylos, a desperate plea for the one thing the Vithar had never conceived of: retreat. The collective, he mentally whimpered, was beyond fragmentation. It had been irrevocably lost, dissolved in the ceaseless maelstrom of human consciousness. High Consul Xylos, though still outwardly composed, a beacon of controlled power, slowly rose from his own meditation sphere. His luminous aura, usually a steady glow, now pulsed with a raw, barely contained intensity, a protective shield against the lingering psychic noise from Earth. He surveyed the wreckage of his mind nexus, the fallen mind units, the shattered crystals, and understood. The cost, as Chorus had so aptly, so desperately projected, was simply too great. This species, these humans, they were not merely unassimilable, they were undigestible. A weaponized paradox, a living, breathing, endlessly generating mental black hole for any who dared to peer within. The decision, unprecedented in Vithar history, was made. Withdrawal. Immediate. The majestic Vithar fleet, symbols of galactic psychic dominance, began a slow, painful, utterly humiliating retreat. The ethereal tendrils of thought that had once reached for Earth now recoiled, shriveled and burned. As the Thought Weaver pulled away, its mighty engines humming not with conquest but with flight, the main view screen flickered. The chaotic internet overlay, which had been pulsating with such furious energy, began to recede, dissolving into a shimmering, almost defiant calm. Then in its place a human face appeared. Admiral Chen. His expression was not triumphant nor vengeful, but profoundly calm. A slight knowing smile played upon his lips, a smile that conveyed not just understanding but a deep, almost ancient amusement. Admiral Chen's voice, clear and confident, resonated not just through the Vithar's mental space, but seemed to echo directly within Mind Master Chorus's fractured consciousness. It was subtly amplified, carrying a message that transcended mere language. He offered no threats, no gloating, merely a polite, almost casual greeting. He acknowledged their departure, a graceful euphemism for utter rout. He hoped they had enjoyed the tour, a sardonic touch that twisted the mental knife in Chorus's already raw psyche. He implied that the deluge they had experienced was merely a complimentary sample, a terrifying suggestion of hidden depths, yet untouched. Chorus, his mental defenses shattered, stared at the human, the realization a cold dread in his broken mind. They knew, they had known all along. High Consul Xylos, absorbing the human's words, projected a mental response that was steady, but carried a new reverence, an almost fearful respect. He acknowledged the truth. Their minds were not merely chaotic. They were designed for chaos. They thrived on disruption, on the unpredictable, on the infinite, ever-changing dance of information and misinformation. They were, in essence, a living, breathing fortress of unreason, impervious to logic, immune to mental subjugation. Admiral Chen, a human face on a screen, confirmed this with a simple yet profound statement. We call it free will, creativity, critical thinking, shitposting, take your pick. It's what makes us us, and it's contagious. The chilling implication reverberated through the Vithar collective. They had touched it, and now they owned it. They were inoculated against simple mind control, yes, but at the cost of their own mental integrity. The Vithar ships, mere specks against the indifferent stars, fully disengaged from the Sol system. Their retreat a testament to humanity's unique and terrifying defense. As they jumped to faster-than-light travel, Admiral Chen's image remained, now projected onto a massive holographic display within a human orbital command center. He turned to his human colleagues, a room filled not with military solemnity but with a casual, almost relieved air, some stifling chuckles echoing softly. The crisis was over. A human analyst, scrolling casually through a tablet, confirmed the Vithar's mental state. One of their mind masters, she reported, was now convinced he was a sentient toaster. Another, the High Consul himself, was actively debating the merits of a flat Earth, having absorbed 1,000 contradictory data points from ancient human forums. The mental contamination was profound and likely permanent. Deep within the retreating darkness of the Thought Weaver, Mind Master Chorus remained a broken shell. His mind, once a crystalline chamber of pure thought, was now a fractured, echoing space filled with 1,000 competing voices, 1,000,000 absurd images. His mental whispers, once commands to an empire, were now a horrifying litany of humanity's infectious culture. Never gonna give you up. Never gonna let you down. The words, nonsensical yet impossibly persistent, became his new internal mantra, a psychological anchor point in a sea of madness. He was infected. Forever changed. The Vithar ship disappeared into the vastness of faster-than-light travel, leaving behind a soul system that seemed to hum with a newfound, subtle defiance. The humans, once seen as primitives, as mere chaos, had revealed their true, terrifying power, not of weapons nor of advanced technology, but of their own untamed, unfathomable minds. A defense mechanism born of sheer, glorious, beautiful, and utterly horrifying human nature. A testament to the fact that some things, some species, are simply too complex, too contradictory, too human to ever be controlled. And as the distant star faded, one final, faint whisper seemed to echo across the void from the broken minds of the Vithar. This is fine.